A millionaire chases after a little beggar girl who stole from him. But when he catches, he is in tears. At the end. The evening shadows crept across Manhattan's bustling streets as Alexander Crawford's polished leather shoes clicked against the wet pavement. His tailored suit and silver Rolex marked him as someone who commanded power. CEO of Crawford Pharmaceuticals, a man whose net worth exceeded billions. The autumn wind carried the scent of coming rain, but Alexander barely noticed, his mind occupied with the next hostile takeover. A slight jostle broke his concentration. In the split second it took him to register the small figure darting past, his hand instinctively went to his pocket. Empty, his Italian leather wallet gone. Through the crowd, he caught a glimpse of a tiny thief disappearing down a side street. Stop. Thief, his voice boomed across the street, causing heads to turn. But what made him pause wasn't the theft, it was the size of his perpetrator. A child, no more than 8, clutching something else besides his wallet, a bottle of prescription medicine that had fallen from her worn jacket. The chase led them through narrowing alleyways, away from the gleaming skyscrapers into the city's forgotten corners. The girl was quick, but desperation made Alexander quicker. He could hear her ragged breathing, see her torn sneakers catching on broken concrete. When she stumbled, the medicine bottle shattered against the ground, pills scattering like precious pearls. The girl's anguished cry echoed off the walls, "No, Mom's medicine." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow, stopping him in his tracks. The girl fell to her knees, frantically gathering the spilled pills with trembling hands, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. And in that moment, despite his rage, despite his wounded pride, Alexander Crawford felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sharp, unexpected sting of compassion. Little did he know, this encounter would unravel everything he thought he knew about wealth, power, and the true cost of a life. If this story touches your heart, and you believe in the power of compassion to change lives, we invite you to join our storytelling community. Subscribe to stay connected with more meaningful narratives that remind us of our shared humanity and the triumph of the human spirit. Alexander Crawford hadn't always been the cold-hearted titan of industry that Wall Street knew him as. 15 years ago, he was a different man, a devoted father who spent weekends teaching his daughter Olivia how to ride her bike in Central Park. His office desk, now covered with acquisition reports, once displayed her artwork and school achievements. Everything changed on that rainy October evening. Olivia, just 7 years old, was returning from ballet practice when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact was devastating. Alexander spent 3 agonizing days in the hospital, watching helplessly as doctors fought to save his only child. Despite their best efforts, Olivia slipped away on a quiet Sunday morning, taking with her all the warmth and joy that had once filled Alexander's world. The loss shattered his marriage. His wife Catherine couldn't bear the sight of their empty home and eventually moved to Europe, leaving Alexander alone with his grief. He threw himself into work with a savage intensity, as if building higher profits could somehow fill the void Olivia left behind. The gentle father who once read bedtime stories transformed into a ruthless businessman who bought out struggling companies and stripped them for parts. His board members praised his sharp instincts and unwavering resolve. Competitors feared his tactical precision in corporate takeovers. Nobody dared mention the family photos that disappeared from his office or how he avoided the pediatric wing during his hospital board meetings. The anniversary of Olivia's death became just another working day, marked only by an extra bottle of scotch in his study. Year by year, deal by deal, Alexander built Crawford Pharmaceuticals into a billion-dollar empire. He developed a reputation for clinical efficiency in business decisions, never allowing emotion to cloud his judgment. Employees whispered about how he could fire entire departments without blinking, how he cancelled Christmas bonuses to fund aggressive expansion plans. The financial press dubbed him the Ice King of Wall Street, a title he wore like armor. His penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park became a monument to success, filled with expensive art and designer furniture, yet devoid of family photos or personal touches. The only reminder of Olivia was a small ballet shoe, locked away in his desk drawer, untouched for years. Even his charitable donations were calculated moves for tax benefits and public relations, never stemming from genuine compassion. At 45, Alexander Crawford seemed untouchable. His silver hair and steel-grey eyes projected authority, his custom suits and luxury cars declared his status. He moved through life like a perfectly programmed machine, measuring everything in profits and losses, risks and returns. Board meetings became his battlefield, spreadsheets his weapons, and corporate raiders his enemies to conquer. But beneath the polished exterior, nightmares still plagued him of screeching tires, of hospital corridors, of a small hand growing cold in his grip. He buried these moments deep, drowning them in work and whiskey, convinced that feeling nothing was better than feeling loss. The man who once taught his daughter about kindness now scoffed at the very notion, seeing compassion as a weakness he couldn't afford. This was the Alexander Crawford who chased a small thief through Manhattan's streets, a man who had everything money could buy but had lost everything that truly mattered. Little did he know that this encounter would force him to confront the humanity he had so carefully locked away, and perhaps find a path back to the father he used to be. Sarah Mitchell once stood at the pinnacle of medical excellence at New York Presbyterian Hospital. As head of pediatric oncology at 35, she was known for both her brilliant mind and compassionate heart. Her colleagues admired how she could explain complex diagnoses to frightened parents with gentle clarity, how she remembered every patient's favorite cartoon character, and how she never gave up on a child, no matter how dire the prognosis. Her marriage to Michael Bennett, the hospital's chief of surgery, seemed perfect on paper. They were the power couple of modern medicine, featured in medical journals and charity galas. But behind closed doors, Michael's charm masked a desperate ambition. He began cutting corners, falsifying research data to secure lucrative pharmaceutical contracts. When Sarah discovered his scheme to push experimental drugs through trials without proper testing, her world imploded. Choosing integrity over loyalty, Sarah prepared to expose Michael's corruption. But he struck first, methodically destroying her reputation. Using his influence and carefully crafted evidence, he accused her of drug theft and medical malpractice. The hospital board, many of whom owed Michael favors, suspended Sarah pending investigation. Her medical license was revoked, her career shattered overnight. The divorce that followed stripped Sarah of everything. Michael's high-powered lawyers painted her as mentally unstable, claiming her accusations were delusions born of drug addiction. Her colleagues turned away, unwilling to risk their careers by supporting her. The press, fed stories by Michael's PR team, portrayed her as a fallen angel of medicine, another brilliant doctor corrupted by prescription drugs. Left with nothing but her integrity, Sarah retreated to a small apartment in the city's edges. She took jobs at clinics under assumed names, helping those who couldn't afford proper medical care. But fate wasn't finished with her yet. The mysterious symptoms started gradually: fatigue, tremors, increasing weakness. The diagnosis, when it came, was devastating: a rare autoimmune condition that attacked her nervous system. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. The disease was one she had studied extensively, had even written papers about. The treatment required expensive medications, the very ones controlled by pharmaceutical companies now led by her ex-husband. Michael, knowing her condition, made sure every major hospital and insurance provider blacklisted her. Yet Sarah refused to break. She channeled her remaining strength into caring for her daughter Emily, shielding her from the worst of their circumstances. Even as medical bills mounted and treatments became impossible to afford, she maintained her dignity. She taught Emily about resilience, about standing up for truth, even when the world turns against you. The same hands that once performed delicate surgeries now trembled too much to hold a coffee cup, but they never failed to find the strength to hug Emily goodnight. Her voice, once confident in hospital rounds, grew weaker, but still managed to read bedtime stories. She sold everything of value: her medical books, her jewelry, even her wedding ring, to keep Emily in school and food on their table. Now, as her condition worsened without proper treatment, Sarah faced her greatest fear, leaving Emily alone in a world that had proven so cruel. Yet even in her darkest moments, she held on to hope that someday the truth would emerge and her daughter would understand that some principles were worth any price. This was the Sarah Mitchell who lay struggling for breath in a rundown apartment, a woman who had lost everything except her integrity and her daughter's love, unaware that fate was about to connect her story with the man who could either save or destroy what remained of her world. 8-year-old Emily Mitchell's world was far removed from the carefree existence most children her age enjoyed. While other kids worried about homework and playground games, Emily calculated medicine doses and tracked payment deadlines. Her small notebook, filled with careful childish handwriting, kept meticulous records of her mother's symptoms and medication schedules. Every morning began the same way. Emily would wake before sunrise, quietly check on her sleeping mother, then prepare their meager breakfast from whatever the food bank had provided. She'd learned to stretch a single can of soup into 2 meals, to make stale bread palatable by toasting it, to ignore her own hunger when supplies ran low. The kitchen chair she stood on to reach the stove had become her battle station in the war against poverty. School was both a refuge and a burden. Emily excelled in her studies, particularly science and math, inheriting her mother's sharp mind, but she lived in constant fear of anyone discovering their situation. She wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, carefully washed by hand each night. During lunch she'd sit alone, pretending she preferred to read rather than admit she had no food to share or money to buy any. The other children whispered about her worn clothes and serious demeanor, but Emily had developed an armor of quiet dignity. She carried herself with a grace beyond her years, answering taunts with silence and maintaining perfect grades despite her circumstances. Her teachers noticed her potential but remained unaware of the little girl who spent her evenings studying medical terms instead of playing with dolls. The local pharmacy became her second home. Emily memorized the prices of every medication her mother needed, calculated discounts, and learned which pharmacists might be willing to bend rules about prescriptions. She became an expert at reading her mother's symptoms, knowing when to scrimp on food to save for crucial medicines, when to seek help from free clinics, and when to panic. Her small hands grew skilled at administering injections when her mother's tremors became too severe. She learned to recognize the signs of an impending crisis, to keep emergency numbers ready, to lie convincingly to concerned neighbors. The weight of adult responsibility settled on her narrow shoulders, aging her soul while her body remained painfully young and vulnerable. Yet beneath the forced maturity, Emily remained a child who desperately needed her mother. Late at night, when pain kept Sarah awake, Emily would crawl into bed beside her, sharing stories about the future they'd have when Mom got better. She'd describe the hospital they'd build together, where no one would be turned away for lack of money, where doctors would remember what it meant to care more about people than profits. The streets of New York became her hunting ground for opportunities, discarded bottles to recycle, odd jobs she could manage after school, and sometimes, when desperation peaked, unattended wallets or unlocked medicine cabinets. Each theft burned her conscience, but the sight of her mother struggling to breathe would harden her resolve. She justified each crime as a small wrong in service of a greater right: her mother's survival. This was Emily Mitchell, daughter, caregiver, and reluctant thief. A child forced to grow up too fast, carrying burdens no young heart should bear, yet maintaining an unshakable faith that tomorrow might bring change. She was unaware that her fateful encounter with Alexander Crawford would set in motion events that would transform not only her life but the lives of everyone involved. The morning after the theft, Alexander sat in his mahogany-lined office, the girl's desperate cry about her mother's medicine still echoing in his mind. Against his usual principles, he found himself scanning police reports of the incident. Something about her face, streaked with tears and dirt, haunted him. His secretary's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the arrival of his private investigator. James Morgan, a former NYPD detective, entered carrying a thick folder. "You'll want to see this, Mr. Crawford," he said, spreading photographs across the desk. The girl's name is Emily Mitchell. 8 years old, lives with her mother, Sarah Mitchell. But here's where it gets interesting. He pulled out a newspaper clipping from 5 years ago, a story about a prestigious doctor's fall from grace. Alexander's hands froze as he recognized the photograph. A younger, healthier Sarah Mitchell stood in a white coat, accepting an award for pediatric excellence. The same woman who had saved countless children's lives at New York Presbyterian, including... He quickly opened his desk drawer, pulling out a yellowed hospital record he'd kept for 15 years. "Dr. Sarah Mitchell," he read aloud, his voice barely a whisper, "lead physician during Olivia's final days." The memories flooded back, a kind-faced doctor who had worked tirelessly to save his daughter, who had held his hand when delivering the news he couldn't bear to hear, who had wept with him when Olivia's heart finally stopped. James continued his report, detailing Sarah's devastating fall. Her ex-husband's accusations, the suspension of her medical license, the loss of everything she'd worked for. But something didn't add up. Alexander remembered Sarah's unwavering integrity during Olivia's treatment. The woman who had spent hours explaining every procedure, who had fought insurance companies on his behalf, couldn't be the same person accused of drug theft and malpractice. "Find everything you can about her ex-husband," Alexander commanded, his business instincts awakening. Medical records, financial transactions, everyone he's connected to. As James left, Alexander stared at the security footage from last night, Emily's small figure running through the rain, his wallet clutched in her tiny hands. Hours turned into days as Alexander delved deeper into Sarah's case. His investigation revealed a pattern of suspicious deaths in experimental drug trials under Michael Bennett's supervision, trials that Sarah had questioned. Financial records showed massive payments from pharmaceutical companies funneled through offshore accounts, the very companies that now supplied Crawford Pharmaceuticals. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. His company's recent success had been built partly on drugs rushed through trials by Michael Bennett, trials that may have cost lives. The same corrupt system that had destroyed Sarah's career had made him millions. Alexander felt the walls of his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. Late one night, reviewing medical board hearing transcripts, he found Sarah's final testimony before losing her license. Her words leapt from the page, "I took an oath to do no harm. I cannot remain silent while patients are used as guinea pigs for untested drugs. Someone must speak for those who cannot speak for themselves." The same words she had spoken to him during Olivia's treatment, when explaining why she wouldn't authorize an experimental treatment that might have bought his daughter a few more weeks of suffering. He had respected her decision then, understanding it came from a place of compassion rather than indifference. Alexander's private line rang. James again. "Sir, you need to see this. I found irregularities in Dr. Bennett's research data. Evidence tampering, falsified results, deaths covered up as expected complications, and sir, there's a connection to Olivia's case." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Alexander steadied himself against his desk, his daughter's ballet shoe visible in the open drawer. What connection? The drunk driver who hit Olivia. He was a research subject in one of Bennett's trials. The accident happened 2 days after he reported severe side effects, including disorientation and blackouts. Bennett buried the report and claimed the death was unrelated to his drug. In that moment, Alexander Crawford, the man who had spent 15 years building walls around his heart, felt them shatter completely. His daughter's death, Sarah's destruction, Emily's desperate theft, all connected by one man's ruthless ambition. The same man whose drugs now filled Crawford Pharmaceuticals' inventory. Alexander reached for his phone, hands shaking with a mixture of rage and purpose. "Cancel all my meetings tomorrow," he told his secretary, "and find me Sarah Mitchell's current address." The time had come to right some wrongs, to honor both his daughter's memory and the doctor who had fought to protect others from suffering her fate. Emily's world had shrunk to a series of desperate calculations. Her mother's condition was deteriorating rapidly, each breath becoming more labored, each tremor more violent. The stolen wallet had yielded enough for one prescription, but they needed 3 different medications to keep Sarah stable. The girl sat at their worn kitchen table, counting coins and crumpled bills for the 100th time, knowing it would never be enough. She had already sold everything of value in their apartment: her mother's medical books, their old laptop, even the locket containing her grandmother's picture. The local pawn shop owner had stopped accepting her items, his pity becoming too heavy to bear. The food bank supplies barely lasted 3 days now, and Emily had started skipping meals to ensure her mother could eat. That morning, Sarah had collapsed while trying to reach the bathroom. Emily, small but determined, had somehow managed to help her mother back to bed. The incident left both of them shaken, knowing time was running out. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," Sarah had whispered, her once steady doctor's hands trembling as she stroked Emily's hair. "You shouldn't have to live like this." The sound of heavy footsteps outside their apartment door interrupted Emily's calculations. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men in suits, not the usual bill collectors. Her heart raced as she recognized one of them, the man whose wallet she had stolen. Emily quickly pushed a chair against the door, her mind racing through possible escape routes. "Emily?" Emily Mitchell, Alexander Crawford's voice was softer than she remembered from the chase. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need to speak with your mother, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. It's about Michael Bennett." The name sent a chill through Emily. She had overheard enough late-night phone calls to know her father was the source of their suffering. From her parents' bedroom, Sarah's weak voice called out, "Emily, who is it?" Making a decision that would change everything, Emily opened the door. Alexander Crawford stood there, his imposing figure somehow less threatening in the dim hallway light. Behind him, his investigator carried a briefcase full of documents, evidence that would expose Michael Bennett's crimes and clear Sarah's name. The apartment's condition shocked Alexander. Medical supplies cluttered every surface, prescription bottles lined up like soldiers on the kitchen counter. Through the bedroom doorway, he saw Sarah, the brilliant doctor who had fought to save his daughter, now looked fragile and worn, a shadow of her former self. "Dr. Mitchell," Alexander began, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if you remember me. 15 years ago you treated my daughter, Olivia Crawford." Sarah's eyes widened with recognition. "Little Olivia," she whispered. "The ballerina." I think about her often." Her words triggered a coughing fit that brought Emily rushing to her side with water and pills. Alexander watched the young girl's practiced movements, checking her mother's pulse, adjusting pillows, administering medication with the skill of a trained nurse. He saw in Emily's careful actions the same dedication he had witnessed in Sarah years ago, the same unwavering commitment to caring for others. "I know the truth about Michael," Alexander said, as James began laying out documents on the kitchen table. "About the drug trials, the falsified data, the lives lost, including possibly my daughter's." He paused, the weight of this revelation visible in his stance. "I'm here to help make things right." Sarah listened in stunned silence as Alexander and James explained what they had uncovered. Evidence of Michael's corruption, proof of her innocence, connections that went deeper than anyone had suspected. But Emily, ever practical, cut through the discussion with a child's direct honesty. "Can you help my mum get her medicine?" she asked, holding up her notebook of careful calculations. "That's what matters right now. She needs these 3 prescriptions, but we can't afford them anymore." Alexander looked at the notebook, seeing lists of medications, prices, and payment schedules written in childish handwriting. Pages of desperate mathematics trying to solve an impossible equation. His throat tightened as he realized this small girl had been carrying the weight of her mother's survival alone. "Yes, Emily," he replied, taking out his phone. I can help with the medicine, and much more. He called his personal physician, arranging immediate home care for Sarah. As he spoke, Emily clutched her mother's hand, tears of relief streaming down her face. What none of them knew was that Michael Bennett had his own surveillance in place. As Alexander Crawford's car pulled up to the apartment building, photos were taken. As James carried in boxes of evidence, messages were sent. In his luxurious office across town, Michael Bennett began making calls of his own, setting in motion events that would test them all. Michael Bennett sat in his penthouse office at Bennett Pharmaceuticals, examining the surveillance photos of Alexander Crawford entering Sarah's apartment building. His manicured fingers tapped rhythmically on his mahogany desk as he processed this unexpected development. The great Alexander Crawford, showing interest in his ex-wife's case, could destroy everything he'd built. "Get me everything on Crawford," he barked into his phone. Every weakness, every skeleton, every pressure point we can use. His legal team had already warned him about Crawford's investigation into the old drug trials. But Michael hadn't survived this long in the pharmaceutical industry by playing defense. Reports began flooding in about Crawford's recent activities, the private investigators, the document requests, the meetings with former research subjects. Michael's face darkened as he realized the extent of Crawford's probe. The connection to Olivia Crawford's death was particularly dangerous. If that information went public, everything would unravel. He pulled up Sarah's medical records on his computer, noting her deteriorating condition with clinical detachment. The autoimmune disease attacking her nervous system was rare but treatable with medications his company controlled. He had ensured that every major pharmacy and hospital would deny her access to these drugs, a slow revenge for her attempted whistleblowing. So his assistant interrupted. The board members are waiting in the conference room. Michael straightened his tie, practiced his convincing smile in the window reflection, and headed to meet them. The boardroom fell silent as he entered, 12 powerful figures waiting to hear how he would handle this threat to their profits. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "we have a situation developing with Crawford Pharmaceuticals. Their CEO seems to be taking an unhealthy interest in some of our past research protocols." He clicked through a presentation showing how their stock might be affected if certain information became public. "What do you suggest?" asked the board chairman, his voice heavy with implied threat. They all had too much to lose if the truth emerged about those drug trials. Michael's smile turned predatory. "Alexander Crawford has one weakness: he still hasn't recovered from his daughter's death. Now he's forming an emotional attachment to my ex-wife and her child. We can use that." He laid out his plan, watching the board members' expressions shift from concern to calculated interest. But the vote was unanimous. They would strike first, using their influence to pressure Crawford's company, while simultaneously destroying any remaining credibility Sarah might have. Michael would personally ensure that Emily became a ward of the state, removing Sarah's last reason to fight. As the board members filed out, Michael received another report. Crawford had arranged for private medical care for Sarah, bypassing the hospitals under Bennett's influence. More concerning, he had started transferring large sums of money to law firms specializing in medical malpractice and corporate fraud. Michael called his most trusted associate, a man who handled delicate matters with brutal efficiency. "I need you to send a message," he instructed. "Nothing too obvious, just enough to remind Crawford what happens to people who cross me." That evening, as Michael watched the sunset from his penthouse, his phone buzzed with a text message delivered. "Crawford's car won't be drivable tomorrow," he smiled, sipping his aged scotch. But the smile faded as he opened an email from his source in the DA's office. Crawford had submitted evidence, years of research data, financial records, witness statements. But for the first time in years, Michael felt a flicker of genuine fear. He had buried the truth about those drug trials deep, had paid off or silenced everyone who might talk. But Crawford had resources he hadn't anticipated, and more importantly, a personal motivation to see justice done. Opening his safe, Michael removed a thick folder labeled insurance. Inside were documents that could implicate half the medical board in his schemes. If he went down, he wouldn't go alone. He began making copies, preparing for every contingency. A final report arrived near midnight. Crawford had visited Olivia's grave after leaving Sarah's apartment, staying for over an hour. Michael studied the surveillance photo, noting how Crawford had knelt before the headstone, his shoulders shaking with what appeared to be sobs. "Perfect," Michael murmured, already formulating his next move. He would use Crawford's grief against him, make him question whether he was thinking clearly, suggest that his obsession with Sarah's case was just displaced guilt over his daughter's death. The game was set. Michael Bennett, who had built his empire on others' suffering, prepared for one final battle, never suspecting that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse from within. The crisis began without warning on a quiet Sunday morning. Sarah's condition deteriorated rapidly, her body rejecting the generic medications they'd been forced to use. Emily awoke to find her mother convulsing, skin clammy and grey, breath coming in ragged gasps. "Mr. Crawford," Emily's panicked voice crackled through Alexander's phone at 4 a.m. "Mom can't breathe properly. Her lips are turning blue. Please help." The raw terror in her voice propelled him from bed to car in minutes, breaking every speed limit between his penthouse and their apartment. He arrived to find Emily performing basic CPR, her small hands maintaining the rhythm she'd learned from YouTube videos. The sight stopped him cold, a child fighting death with nothing but determination and love. "The ambulance is coming," he managed, kneeling beside them. "Keep going, Emily. Just like that." Paramedics burst through the door moments later, quickly taking over. Their faces grew grim as they checked Sarah's vitals. BP's dropping fast. O2 stats critical, one called out, attaching monitors. "We need to move now." They lifted Sarah onto the stretcher, equipment beeping urgently. In the ambulance, Emily clutched her mother's hand while Alexander made rapid-fire calls. "This is Alexander Crawford. I need Dr. Reynolds at Presbyterian's ear immediately. Clear any administrative obstacles. Yes, I understand it's Sunday. Make it happen." His voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. But the hospital had other plans. As they rushed through the ER doors, a senior administrator blocked their path. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crawford, but Dr. Mitchell is banned from treatment here. Board's orders." The man's eyes flicked nervously between Alexander and a memo on his clipboard. Alexander's response was immediate and devastating. "Let me be clear. You will treat her now, or tomorrow's headlines will detail how Presbyterian Hospital left a critically ill patient to die over a personal vendetta. Your choice." His words, cold as steel, cut through the bureaucratic resistance. Dr. Reynolds arrived as they wheeled Sarah into the critical care unit, her condition worsening by the minute. "Multiple organ systems are failing," he reported, studying the monitors. "We need to start the proper medication protocol immediately, but..." He hesitated, glancing at the administrator hovering nearby. But what Alexander demanded, already guessing the answer. "The medications she needs are manufactured exclusively by Bennett Pharmaceuticals. They blocked all local supplies to hospitals treating Dr. Mitchell. We can't access them through normal channels." Emily, who had been silent until now, spoke up with a child's terrible clarity. "Mom's going to die because Dad won't let her have the medicine." Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "How can he do this?" Alexander felt something break inside him, the last remnants of his corporate detachment shattered by a child's pain. He pulled out his phone again, this time dialing a number he'd hoped never to use. "Jason? Remember that favor you owe me from Dubai? I need a private plane and diplomatic clearance, now. And contact our European suppliers. I need a full set of Bennett's protocols, whatever it costs." Hours blurred together as Sarah fought for life, machines breathing for her while Alexander moved heaven and earth to bypass Michael Bennett's blockade. Emily remained a constant presence, her small figure curled in a chair beside her mother's bed, whispering encouragement through the glass partition. Finally, around midnight, a courier arrived with a temperature-controlled case. Inside were the vital medications, smuggled from a European supplier at an astronomical cost. Dr. Reynolds immediately began the treatment, his team working with practiced efficiency. But as dawn approached, it became clear they were losing ground. Sarah's body, weakened by months of inadequate treatment, struggled to respond. The monitors showed declining vitals despite their best efforts. Dr. Reynolds pulled Alexander aside, his expression grave. Her immune system is too compromised. Without sustained treatment in a properly equipped facility, she won't survive another crisis like this. And Bennett has blocked her access to every major hospital in the country. Alexander watched Emily through the window, her face pressed against the glass, mouthing words of encouragement to her unconscious mother. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter all their lives. What if I could guarantee her treatment at a private facility, one beyond Bennett's reach? Dr. Reynolds looked skeptical. The only place with that capability would be the Crawford Medical Research Center in Switzerland, but the waiting list. I own it, Alexander cut in. I can have a fully equipped medical transport ready in hours. We can transfer her directly to our intensive care unit there. But Sir Dr. Reynolds hesitated, the cost of such treatment. Damn the cost, Alexander's voice cracked with emotion. I watched my daughter die in this hospital 15 years ago. I won't let it happen to Emily's mother, not when I can prevent it. As he moved to make arrangements, an orderly rushed up with an urgent message. Police officers were in the lobby, accompanied by social services. Michael Bennett had made his move, filing an emergency petition for Emily's removal from Sarah's custody on grounds of medical neglect and child endangerment. The game had changed. Now they weren't just fighting for Sarah's life, but for Emily's future as well. Alexander Crawford, who had spent years building walls around his heart, found himself preparing for a battle that would require him to tear them all down. Emily's world collapsed in slow motion as the police officers approached the ICU. Through the glass walls, she watched them conferring with hospital administration, their badges glinting under fluorescent lights. A woman in a grey suit clutched a folder stamped with official seals documents that would tear her from her mother's side. No, please, she whispered, backing away from the door. I can't leave her. She needs me. Her small hands gripped the bedrail of Sarah's bed, knuckles white with determination. Alexander stood beside her, his tall frame positioned protectively between Emily and the approaching authorities. The social worker entered first, her practiced smile doing nothing to mask the gravity of the situation. Emily Mitchell. I'm Mrs. Davidson from Child Protective Services. We need to talk about your living situation. Her voice was gentle but firm, the tone of someone used to dealing with difficult removals. Her living situation is being handled, Alexander interjected, his business voice in full force. I've already arranged for proper care and supervision. He produced documents of his own temporary guardianship papers his lawyers had prepared, anticipating this moment. Mrs. Davidson frowned, scanning the papers. Mr. Crawford, while your intentions seem admirable, Dr. Bennett has raised serious concerns about his daughter's welfare. We have documented evidence of unsafe living conditions, medical neglect, and... She paused, choosing her words carefully, criminal behavior. Emily felt her face burn with shame, knowing they meant her theft. The social worker continued, furthermore, with Dr. Mitchell's current condition, she's clearly unable to provide adequate care. The court has granted temporary custody to Dr. Bennett. My father, Emily's voice trembled with disbelief. He's the reason we're here. He made sure Mum couldn't get her medicine. He made us live like that. Tears streamed down her face as years of hurt and anger poured out. He never even visited when Mum got sick. He didn't care if we lived or died. The police officers shifted uncomfortably, but Mrs. Davidson remained unmoved. I understand you're upset, but Dr. Bennett is your father and a respected physician. He can provide the stable home environment you need right now. Alexander's mind raced, calculating options. He could see Michael's strategy: gain custody of Emily, use her as leverage to force Sarah to drop any potential lawsuit. With Emily under his control, Sarah would sign anything, admit to anything, just to protect her daughter. Emily needs to stay with her mother, Alexander argued, his voice intense. Sarah's condition is critical. Separating them now could have devastating psychological consequences for both of them. He pulled out his phone, ready to wake up every judge and lawyer in his contact list. But the law was clear, and Michael's influence ran deep. The police officers moved forward, their expressions sympathetic but determined. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be," one said softly. Emily's scream when they tried to lead her away would haunt Alexander forever. She clung to her mother's unconscious form, her small body shaking with sobs. "Mom, wake up. Please wake up. Don't let them take me." The monitors began beeping erratically as Sarah's vital signs responded to her daughter's distress. "Stop," Alexander commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're endangering the patient. At least let her say goodbye properly." He knelt beside Emily, speaking gently. "Emily, look at me. I promise you I will not let this be permanent. I will move heaven and earth to bring you back to your mother. But right now, you need to be brave." Emily's tear-stained face turned to him, searching for truth in his words. "You promise? You won't let him hurt Mom again?" "I swear it," Alexander replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll protect both of you with everything I have." The social worker allowed Emily 5 minutes to say goodbye. The girl kissed her mother's pale cheek, whispering promises to be strong, to come back soon. She placed her worn teddy bear next to Sarah's pillow, her most precious possession, standing guard. As they led Emily away, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced since Olivia's death: a father's rage at seeing a child suffer. He watched Emily's small figure disappear down the hospital corridor, her face turned back toward her mother, until the last possible moment. Dr. Reynolds touched his arm gently. "Sir, we need to prepare Dr. Mitchell for transport. The medical helicopter is waiting." The race against time continued on multiple fronts, now saving Sarah's life, while fighting to reunite her with Emily. Alexander made one final call before boarding the helicopter. "James, track every move Michael Bennett makes with Emily. I want to know where she is every minute of every day, and get me everything we have on that social worker. Nobody's hands are completely clean in this city." The helicopter lifted off as dawn broke over New York, carrying an unconscious Sarah toward Hope in Switzerland, while somewhere below her daughter was being driven toward an uncertain fate in her father's custody. Alexander Crawford, who had spent 15 years running from emotional attachments, now found himself fighting to protect the very kind of bonds he had once abandoned. Alexander's internal conflict reached its peak during the medical flight to Switzerland. Watching the medical team work on Sarah's fragile form, he confronted the magnitude of what he was undertaking. His phone buzzed constantly with crisis alerts from Crawford Pharmaceuticals. The board was in upheaval over his sudden departure and unauthorized use of company resources. "Sir," his CFO's voice crackled through the satellite phone, "the board is calling an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the liability of involving the company in Dr. Mitchell's case. Several major shareholders are threatening to sell." The implied threat was clear: his position as CEO could be at risk. Through the plane's window, Alexander watched the sunrise paint the clouds gold, remembering another dawn 15 years ago when he'd watched his daughter slip away. The memories he'd suppressed for so long came flooding back: Olivia's smile, her tiny ballet shoes, her brave face during treatments. And now Emily's face, tear-streaked and terrified, overlaid those memories. "Let them meet," he replied finally, "and release this statement to the press. Crawford Pharmaceuticals is launching a full investigation into potentially dangerous drug trials conducted by Bennett Pharmaceuticals. Emphasize our commitment to patient safety over profits." He paused, then added, and announce my personal donation of $50 million to establish a foundation for medical ethics oversight. The CFO's sharp intake of breath was audible. Sir, that's your personal fortune, not company funds. The board can't stop you, but your lifestyle, your investments. My lifestyle needs changing anyway, Alexander cut him off. Sometimes the right thing costs everything. He ended the call, turning his attention back to Sarah's monitors. Dr. Reynolds approached with fresh test results. Her condition is stabilizing, but she's not out of danger. The next 24 hours will be critical. He hesitated, then added, Mr. Crawford, I have to ask, why are you doing this? You're risking everything for someone who was once just another doctor in your daughter's case. Alexander was silent for a long moment, watching Sarah's chest rise and fall with the help of machines. Because 15 years ago, she was the only one who told me the truth about Olivia's condition. Not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. She chose integrity over comfort, compassion over convenience. And now her daughter is showing that same courage. His phone buzzed again, James, with an update on Emily. Michael had installed her in his Manhattan penthouse under the watch of hired staff. She had refused food, refused to speak, sitting silently by the window staring in the direction of the hospital. Keep our people close, Alexander instructed. I want to know the moment he makes a mistake. He knew Michael Bennett well enough to know that mistakes would come. Men like him always believed themselves untouchable. The flight surgeon interrupted with urgent news. They were picking up early signs of cardiac complications. Sarah's heart was showing strain from the prolonged stress. They needed to land as soon as possible. Alexander made another call, this time to the Crawford Medical Center in Geneva. I need the entire cardiac team ready the moment we land. Clear all other procedures, and set up a secure video link in her room. Her daughter will need to see her. As they began their descent into Geneva, Alexander received the news he'd been dreading. The board had voted to suspend him pending investigation. His access to company resources would be restricted, his decisions subject to oversight. They'd stopped short of removing him completely, but the message was clear: help Sarah Mitchell and lose everything. Looking at Sarah's pale face, so like her daughter's, Alexander made his final choice. He typed out a message to his lawyers: proceed with the transfer of my controlling shares to the Medical Ethics Foundation, and filed the whistleblower evidence against Bennett Pharmaceuticals with the SEC. The moment he hit send, he knew there was no going back. His fortune, his company, his carefully constructed world, all sacrificed for a woman he barely knew and a child who had tried to rob him. Yet for the first time since Olivia's death, he felt truly alive. As the plane touched down in Geneva, Alexander Crawford, no longer a billionaire CEO, but simply a man trying to right ancient wrongs, made one last call. To Emily, in her gilded cage in Manhattan, he sent a message: hold on, brave girl. The truth is coming out, and when it does, no power on earth will keep you from your mother. The Swiss medical team swarmed the plane, their efficient movements a choreography of hope. Alexander watched them wheel Sarah toward the waiting ambulance, her life still hanging by a thread. But now, at least, she had a fighting chance. And in giving her that chance, he had found something he thought he'd lost forever: a reason to believe in justice, in redemption, in love. The Crawford Medical Center in Geneva became a fortress of healing. Alexander transformed Sarah's suite into a command center, coordinating the battle on multiple fronts: her medical care, Emily's situation, and the growing investigation into Bennett Pharmaceuticals. Monitors displayed Sarah's vital signs alongside news feeds and legal documents, while a secure video link stayed ready for any moment Emily might be allowed to call. Dr. Weber, the center's chief of immunology, brought encouraging news on the third day. The new treatment protocol is working, he reported, showing Alexander the latest test results. Her body is responding to the medication. The inflammation markers are dropping. The doctor's Swiss accent couldn't mask his excitement at Sarah's remarkable progress. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, each awakening longer than the last. During her lucid moments, she asked about Emily, her doctor's mind still sharp enough to read the evasions in their responses. "Tell me the truth," she demanded during one such moment, her voice weak but determined. "What has Michael done with my daughter?" Alexander sat beside her bed, taking her fragile hand in his. "Emily is physically safe," he began carefully, "but Michael has temporary custody. We're fighting it, Sarah. I have the best lawyers working around the clock." He showed her the video feed from his investigator Emily sitting in Michael's penthouse library, refusing to engage with the tutors and psychologists her father had hired. Sarah's monitors spiked with her distress. She's alone with him. After everything he's done, she tried to rise, only to fall back against the pillows, her body too weak to match her will. He'll destroy her spirit like he tried to destroy mine. "Emily is stronger than he knows," Alexander assured her, adjusting her oxygen flow. "She's her mother's daughter." He shared the reports from his surveillance team, how Emily maintained a quiet resistance, how she kept a diary documenting every interaction, how she had already mapped every exit and security pattern in the building. Meanwhile, in New York, the investigation into Bennett Pharmaceuticals gained momentum. Alexander's evidence, combined with testimony from former employees emboldened by his example, painted a damning picture. The SEC launched a formal probe, and pharmaceutical regulators began reviewing every drug trial Michael had overseen. Alexander's personal sacrifice made headlines. Billionaire CEO risks all to expose medical fraud. The story caught fire on social media, with thousands sharing their own experiences with Bennett's drugs. Support flooded in from unexpected quarters, medical ethicists, patient advocacy groups, even competing pharmaceutical companies eager to distance themselves from Bennett's practices. But Michael Bennett wasn't finished. He launched a counteroffensive, portraying Alexander as a man unhinged by grief, obsessed with his daughter's death. "Crawford's vendetta against me is destroying a company that helps millions," he told the press. "He's using my ex-wife's illness and my daughter's vulnerability to wage a personal war." The Crawford Pharmaceuticals board, already suspicious of Alexander's actions, called another emergency meeting. "The company's stock has dropped 30%, the chairman reported grimly. "Bennett's legal team is threatening a defamation suit. We need to consider our options." Alexander attended via video link from Sarah's room, his appearance shocking the board members. The polished CEO they knew had been replaced by a man who looked like he'd aged years in days, his silver hair unkempt, his expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in chairs. "Consider your options carefully," he told them, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Because in 72 hours the FBI will announce a full investigation into Bennett's drug trials, including the ones we inherited in last year's merger." The boardroom erupted in chaos as the implications sank in. Back in Geneva, Sarah continued to improve, though progress was agonizingly slow. Physical therapy began, first with simple hand exercises, then graduate movements to rebuild her strength. Alexander attended every session, encouraging her through the pain and exhaustion. During one particularly difficult therapy day, Sarah asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why are you doing all this? You've lost your company, your reputation, everything you've built, and for what? A woman you barely know and a child who tried to steal from you." Alexander was silent for a long moment, helping her adjust the walking frame she now used. Finally he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. 15 years ago I lost my daughter and responded by losing my humanity. I built an empire on the same foundation of greed and indifference that killed Olivia." But Emily paused, gathering himself. "Emily showed me what real courage looks like. And you, Sarah, you never lost your integrity, even when it cost you everything." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But the cost to you is nothing compared to the cost of staying who I was," he finished. "Now, let's try these steps again. Emily will want to see her mother walking when we get her back." That evening, Alexander received two pieces of news. The first was promising his legal team had found irregularities in Michael's custody petition. The second was devastating. Emily had disappeared from the penthouse, leaving only a note gone to find the truth. The Crawford Pharmaceuticals boardroom crackled with tension as members gathered for an emergency session. The news of Alexander's actions had sent shockwaves through Wall Street, and now powerful forces were moving to seize control of the company. Led by Vice President Richard Sterling, the board prepared to vote on removing Alexander completely. Gentleman Sterling addressed the room, his perfectly tailored suit matching his polished demeanor. Crawford's crusade against Bennett Pharmaceuticals has become a liability we can't afford. Our stock has plummeted, partners are backing out, and lawsuits are piling up. We must act decisively. The evidence he presented was damning financial reports showing massive losses, legal opinions warning of liability, and psychiatric evaluations suggesting Alexander's grief over his daughter had finally broken him. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, years of loyalty to Alexander warring with their instinct for self-preservation. But they hadn't counted on Linda Chen, Alexander's longtime secretary and keeper of the company's deepest secrets. She burst into the meeting, clutching a stack of documents. "Before you vote," she announced, her voice steady despite the tension, "you should see what Mr. Crawford asked me to hold for exactly this moment." The documents revealed a web of corruption within the board itself. Secret deals with Bennett Pharmaceuticals, kickbacks from drug trials, evidence of insider trading, all meticulously documented by Alexander over the years. "He knew some of you might turn against him," Linda explained, watching faces pale around the table. He prepared accordingly. Sterling attempted to dismiss the revelations, but Linda wasn't finished. She played an audio recording of him discussing illegal price fixing with Michael Bennett. The boardroom erupted into chaos as members realized their own complicity could no longer be hidden. Meanwhile, across the city, Michael Bennett faced his own crisis. Emily's disappearance had triggered a media frenzy, with questions being raised about his fitness as a parent, his carefully crafted image as the wronged father began to crumble as reporters dug deeper into his past. His phone rang an unlisted number. Having trouble keeping track of an 8-year-old, Michael Alexander's voice was cold with satisfaction. "Perhaps you should have spent less time destroying lives and more time understanding your daughter." "Where is she, Crawford?" Michael snarled, his composure cracking. "If you've taken her." "Like you took her from Sarah," Alexander cut in. "No, Emily made this choice herself. She's braver than either of us imagined. And now the whole world is watching to see what kind of father you really are." The conversation was interrupted by Michael's security team. They'd found evidence that Emily had accessed his private office before disappearing. Several files were missing old research data he'd thought safely hidden. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His own daughter was gathering evidence against him. Back at Crawford Pharmaceuticals, the board vote took an unexpected turn. Linda's revelations had sparked a wave of conscience among some members, while others simply feared prosecution. When the votes were counted, Alexander remained CEO, while Sterling and his closest allies were suspended pending investigation. Linda immediately called Alexander in Geneva. "It worked, sir." The board backed down, but Sterling won't give up easily. He's already reaching out to Bennett's lawyers. Alexander barely registered the victory, his mind focused on Emily. His investigators had traced her movements to the public library, where she'd been researching her father's old drug trials. But then the trail went cold. An 8-year-old girl had managed to disappear in Manhattan, carrying secrets that could destroy powerful men. She's not just hiding, Alexander realized, sharing his thoughts with Sarah during her evening therapy session. She's hunting. Everything she learned, taking care of you, keeping records, managing medications, staying invisible when needed, she's using those skills now. Sarah gripped her walking frame tighter, fighting to take another step. She's too smart to go to obvious places. Think Alexander. Where would a child who spent years being invisible feel safe? The answer hit him suddenly. He called James, his investigator, checked the homeless encampments, especially near hospitals. Look for anyone sharing food with a small girl. Emily knows those communities. They helped her survive while caring for Sarah. The pieces were falling into place, but time was running out. Michael Bennett had hired private security firms to search the city, and they wouldn't show the same restraint as Alexander's team. The race to find Emily had become a desperate contest between protection and persecution. As night fell over Manhattan, Emily Mitchell huddled in a hidden corner of an abandoned building, carefully organizing the documents she'd stolen. Her father had taught her the importance of keeping meticulous records, never imagining she would use that lesson against him. In her small backpack, next to her mother's old medical ID badge, she carried enough evidence to expose decades of corruption. She knew they were looking for her, both Alexander's people and her father's. But she had learned long ago how to become invisible when needed. The same skills that had helped her steal medicine for her mother now helped her steal truth from her father. The truth about Michael Bennett's crimes emerged in an unexpected way. Emily, showing wisdom beyond her years, hadn't taken the documents directly to the authorities or media. Instead, she'd worked methodically, making copies and leaving them in strategic locations: her old school, the free clinic that had helped them, and most importantly, in the hands of other families affected by her father's drug trials. The story exploded across social media. Parents whose children had suffered mysterious symptoms during Bennett's trials began connecting online, sharing their experiences. Medical records that had been buried for years resurfaced. Emily's carefully organized evidence provided the missing links, revealing a pattern of deliberate negligence and falsified data. "Look at this," Sarah whispered in her Geneva hospital room, watching the news unfold on her tablet. Pictures of Emily as a toddler appeared on screen, alongside headlines about Bennett's abandoned family. Former colleagues came forward, describing how Michael had blocked Sarah's attempts to expose safety concerns. The public image he'd crafted began to crumble. Alexander's investigators finally located Emily in an unexpected place: the pediatric ward of New York Presbyterian, where volunteer Candy Stripers had been secretly sheltering her. She'd spent her days comforting sick children, her nights organizing her evidence, protected by nurses who remembered her mother's compassion. "She's just like you," Alexander told Sarah during their nightly video call. "Even in hiding, she's finding ways to help others." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she watched footage of her daughter reading stories to young patients, sharing the comfort she wished someone had offered her during their hardest times. Michael Bennett's response to the growing scandal revealed his true nature. Rather than face the accusations, he attempted to flee the country with millions in offshore accounts. But his private jet never left the runway. FBI agents, armed with Emily's evidence and testimony from former employees, were waiting. The arrest made international headlines. Pharmaceutical CEO arrested for fraud and endangerment. Pictures showed Michael Bennett, no longer the polished executive, being led away in handcuffs. His carefully constructed empire began to collapse as investigations revealed the full scope of his crimes. Emily watched the news from Alexander's office at Crawford Pharmaceuticals, where she'd finally allowed herself to be found. "Will he go to jail?" she asked quietly, her small hand clutching Alexander's larger one. "Will he hurt anyone else?" "No, brave girl," Alexander assured her, marveling at her strength. "Your evidence made sure of that. You've protected a lot of people, just like your mother always tried to do." He showed her the latest video from Geneva. Sarah, taking her first unassisted steps in physical therapy, growing stronger each day. The legal system moved swiftly, driven by public outrage and the overwhelming evidence. Michael's contacts and influence couldn't save him from the weight of his own documented crimes. As he faced multiple federal charges, his former allies rushed to make deals, exposing even more corruption. Sarah's medical license was reinstated with a formal apology from the hospital board. The same institutions that had once shunned her now celebrated her integrity. but she remained focused on her recovery, determined to regain her strength not for vindication, but to reunite with her daughter. Emily's role in exposing the truth earned her unexpected recognition. The media dubbed her the little whistleblower, praising her courage in standing up to her father's corruption. But those who knew her saw past the headlines to the deeper truth: a child who had learned compassion from her mother and found an ally in the most unexpected place. The story took another turn when Alexander received an urgent call from Geneva. Sarah had insisted on attempting to walk unassisted, pushing herself too hard in her determination to recover. She had collapsed, her body still too weak for such exertion. The doctors stabilized her, but the incident highlighted the long road still ahead. "Mum needs me," Emily declared upon hearing the news, her voice carrying the same determination that had helped her survive years of hardship. "We've done what we needed to do here. Can we go to her now?" Alexander looked at the small girl who had changed everything: his perspective, his priorities, his very understanding of wealth and power. She had shown him that true strength often came in the most unexpected packages, and that redemption could begin with a simple act of compassion. "Yes," he answered, already reaching for his phone to arrange the flight. "It's time to bring your mother home." The moment of crisis arrived without warning. As Alexander's private jet prepared for takeoff to Geneva with Emily aboard, federal agents suddenly surrounded the plane. Leading them was Richard Sterling, accompanied by Michael Bennett's lawyers. "Emily Mitchell needs to remain in the country as a material witness," Sterling announced, brandishing a court order. "And Mr. Crawford is under investigation for corporate fraud and kidnapping." The accusations were absurd, but craftily constructed. Alexander's actions to help Sarah and Emily reframed as criminal enterprises. Emily, watching through the plane's window, felt her world tilting again. She'd seen that look before, the same smug satisfaction her father wore when destroying her mother's career. Now Sterling wore it, thinking he had finally outmaneuvered Alexander Crawford. "You can't separate us again," Emily cried, clinging to Alexander as agents boarded the plane. "Mom needs us." Her voice carried the weight of years of trauma, of too many forced separations. Alexander stood, positioning himself between Emily and the approaching agents. "Think carefully about your next move," Sterling, he warned, his voice deadly calm. "You're not just fighting me anymore." He nodded toward the airport perimeter, where news vans were already gathering. Sterling's smile faltered slightly. "The press? Really, Alexander? We both know they'll believe whatever story has the most zeros behind it." He gestured for the agents to move forward. But Emily Mitchell, who had spent years learning to fight impossible battles, wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone, starting a live stream that instantly connected to thousands of supporters who had been tracking her story since the Bennett scandal broke. "I'm Emily Mitchell," she began, her young voice steady. "And these men are trying to keep me from my mother, just like my father did. They're using the same tactics, the same lies." The view count exploded as she spoke, her words reaching across social media platforms. Sterling moved to stop her, but it was too late. Emily continued, tears streaming down her face. "My mom is in hospital in Geneva. She almost died because powerful men like them decided profit was more important than people. Mr. Crawford is the only one who helped us when everyone else looked away, and now they want to punish him for it." The agents hesitated, uncomfortably aware of the cameras now recording their every move. Sterling's phone began buzzing incessantly, board members watching the live stream, panic spreading as their company's reputation hung in the balance. Alexander used the moment to make his own move. "James," he spoke into his phone, "execute Protocol Omega across the city." Servers hummed as encrypted files were released to journalists, regulatory agencies, and law enforcement. Everything Alexander had gathered over years of watching his own board members, every shadowy deal and compromised decision. Sterling's face went ash-white as his phone exploded with notifications. The evidence implicated him in years of corporate fraud, all traceable back to deals with Bennett Pharmaceuticals. He had thought he was destroying Alexander Crawford instead. He had triggered his own downfall. "You knew," Sterling whispered, realization dawning. "You knew I was working with Bennett all along." "I knew the moment you tried to block Sarah's treatment," Alexander replied, "because it's exactly what I would have done in my old life. But Emily taught me there are more important things than power and pride." The federal agents, receiving urgent updates from their superiors, suddenly shifted their attention from Alexander to Sterling. The court order was revealed as fraudulent, part of a desperate last attempt by Bennett's allies to maintain control. Emily's live stream had reached millions, her tear-stained face becoming a symbol of corporate greed versus human compassion. Hashtags trended worldwide. "Let Emily fly, justice for Sarah Crawford hero." Sterling was led away in handcuffs, his carefully constructed plot collapsing around him. But Alexander knew this wasn't the end. There would be more battles, more powerful men trying to protect their interests. The flight to Geneva had become more than a journey to reunite a family. It had become a declaration of war against the system that had enabled men like Michael Bennett. Emily finally lowered her phone, exhausted but triumphant. She turned to Alexander, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. "They'll keep trying to stop us, won't they?" Alexander knelt beside her, straightening her small shoulders with gentle hands. "Yes, but they don't understand what they're fighting against. They think it's about money and power. They don't realize it's about love, a daughter's love for her mother, a mother's sacrifice for her child, and—" He paused, emotion catching in his throat, a father's chance at redemption. The pilot received clearance for takeoff, the engines humming to life. As the plane lifted into the dawn sky, Emily pressed her hand against the window, watching New York recede below. "Hold on, Mom," she whispered. "We're coming?" "Oh." The calm of the flight to Geneva shattered with a single phone call. Sir James's voice crackled through the secure line. "Michael Bennett has escaped federal custody." The news hit Alexander like a physical blow. Beside him, Emily stirred in her sleep, her face troubled even in dreams. "How?" Alexander demanded, moving to the plane's private office to avoid waking her. The details were disturbing, a perfectly orchestrated escape suggesting inside help. Bennett had resources they hadn't uncovered, connections that ran deeper than anyone suspected. "That's not all," James continued grimly. "He accessed his emergency accounts before we could freeze them. He's chartered a private jet to Geneva. He'll land 2 hours before you." The implication was clear. Bennett was racing them to Sarah. Alexander's mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. Bennett was desperate, cornered, with nothing left to lose, the most dangerous kind of enemy. "Alert Geneva police, increase security at the medical center," he ordered, but James interrupted. "Sir, our sources indicate he's not working alone. Someone inside the hospital has been feeding him information about Sarah's condition. We don't know who to trust." Emily appeared in the doorway, her small face pale. "I heard," she said quietly. "He's going to try to hurt Mom again. Isn't he?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes showed the same determination that had helped her survive years of hardship. Alexander pulled up the hospital's security feeds on his laptop. Sarah was in physical therapy, making remarkable progress. She had no idea of the danger approaching. The medical center's serene grounds offered too many access points, too many vulnerabilities. "Change of plans," Alexander announced, dialing the pilot. "We're not landing in Geneva." Emily looked at him questioningly as he arranged for an alternate landing strip in France, just across the border. Sometimes the best defense was unpredictability. His phone buzzed with an urgent message from Linda at Crawford Pharmaceuticals. Bennett had emptied several offshore accounts linked to board members, exposing a network of bribes and kickbacks. In his desperation, he was burning every bridge, destroying everyone who had ever helped him. "He's not just running," Alexander realized. "He's making sure no one survives to testify against him." The pattern became clear. Bennett would try to silence Sarah permanently, eliminating the strongest witness against him. And if Emily was there? Emily watched the realization cross Alexander's face. "We can't let him get to her first," she said, her voice stronger now. "Mom survived everything he did before. She has to survive this too." Alexander gathered his team via secure video conference. "Bennett will expect us to land in Geneva. He'll have people watching the airport, the hospital." Every obvious approach he outlined his plan, a strategy that seemed insane, but might be their only chance. So his head of security protested, "What you're suggesting is extremely dangerous. If anything goes wrong..." "Everything is already wrong," Alexander cut him off. "A murderer is racing us to the hospital where he caught himself, glancing at Emily, where Sarah is recovering. We're out of safe options." Emily touched his arm gently. "You almost called her your daughter," she said softly. "Like you think of me," as she couldn't finish the sentence, years of abandonment making the word too precious to speak. Alexander knelt beside her chair. "Family isn't always about blood, Emily. Sometimes it's about who we choose to fight for." He turned back to the screen. "Implement the plan. And contact Dr. Weber. Will need his help to pull this off." The sun was setting over the Alps as their plane began its descent, not toward Geneva, but to a small private airfield in France. Bennett would be watching the wrong city, waiting for a threat that wouldn't arrive through expected channels. Emily strapped herself into her seat, clutching the worn teddy bear she'd retrieved from Sarah's hospital room. "We're really going to do this?" she asked, equal parts scared and excited. Alexander checked the specialized equipment his team had prepared. "Yes, we are, because sometimes the only way to beat someone who's willing to do anything is to do the impossible." He smiled at her, seeing in her eyes the same courage he'd once seen in Olivia's. "Ready to save your mom, brave girl." As darkness fell over the Swiss border, multiple vehicles moved toward Geneva from different directions. Bennett's men would be watching for them all, never suspecting that the real rescue would come from an entirely unexpected quarter. The most dangerous game of Emily's young life was about to begin. The Crawford Medical Center seemed peaceful in the moonlight, its modern glass walls reflecting the stars. Michael Bennett moved through the shadows like a ghost, his designer suit replaced by dark tactical gear. Years of privilege had given him access to mercenaries who asked no questions, required only payment. Inside the building, Sarah slept unaware of the approaching danger. The night nurse, paid handsomely to disable certain security systems, had added a mild sedative to her evening medication. The few loyal staff members on duty had been diverted to false emergencies on other floors. All clear. Bennett's hired team leader reported through their encrypted channel. "Target floor is secured. No sign of Crawford or the girl. Everything was proceeding according to plan." Or so he thought. High above the medical center, a sleek helicopter approached with its lights off. At the controls, Alexander checked his instruments while Emily, strapped into a specially modified harness, went through her own preparations. The plan was insane, perhaps the most reckless thing Alexander had ever attempted. But it was also their only chance. "Remember," he told Emily, "just like we practiced. Dr. Weber will be waiting at the rendezvous point. Trust your instincts." The girl nodded, her face set with determination as she checked her oxygen mask one final time. Below, Bennett reached Sarah's floor. The corridor stretched empty before him, emergency lights casting ominous shadows. He moved toward her room, a syringe of untraceable poison ready in his pocket. One last loose end to tie up, one final witness to silence. The first sign that something was wrong came from his team's surveillance feed. The hospital's backup generators suddenly engaged, plunging the building into momentary darkness before emergency systems activated. In that brief blackout, something changed. When the lights returned, Bennett found himself facing his own daughter. Emily stood in the corridor outside Sarah's room, small but unflinching. "Hello, Father," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Looking for someone?" Bennett's facade cracked slightly. "Emily?" How did you? He looked around wildly, expecting Crawford to appear. But they were alone in the corridor, his daughter somehow materializing like a ghost. Mom's not here, Emily continued, taking a step forward. She hasn't been here for hours, but I knew you'd come. Just like I knew you'd try to hurt her again. Her words carried years of accumulated pain and understanding. Above them, Alexander guided the helicopter into position, watching through night vision equipment as his team moved into place. Everything hinged on timing now and on Emily's courage. Bennett recovered his composure, trying to project fatherly concern. Emily, you don't understand. I'm here to protect your mother. Crawford has been manipulating you both, but Emily cut him off with a laugh that sounded too old for her years. Lying again, father? Like you lied about the drug trials. Like you lied to the medical board about Mom. She pulled out her phone, the red recording light blinking. I learned from you always keep evidence. Bennett lunged forward, all pretense abandoned, but Emily was already moving. Years of navigating city streets, of avoiding danger, had made her quick. She ducked under his grasp, backing toward the emergency stairwell. Now, she shouted, and the hospital erupted into chaos. Smoke bombs detonated in strategic locations, setting off fire alarms. Bennett's hired team found themselves trapped in sealed sections of the building. Emergency doors activated by Alexander's security system override. Through the confusion, Emily led her father on a calculated chase, always just out of reach, always moving upward. Behind them, Alexander's team systematically neutralized Bennett's mercenaries, but the man himself remained focused solely on catching his daughter. They emerged onto the helipad, wind whipping around them. Bennett grabbed Emily's arm, finally catching her. Enough games, he snarled. Where is your mother? Emily smiled, a child's smile that held no fear. Look up, father. The helicopter appeared above them like an avenging angel, searchlight blazing. Bennett staggered back, shielding his eyes. In that moment, Emily twisted free, running to the helipad's edge, where a rescue harness waited. It's over, Michael Alexander's voice boomed through the helicopter's speakers. Federal agents are already in the building. Every word, every move has been recorded. You've lost. Bennett reached for his weapon, but found himself surrounded by laser sights from multiple positions. His own mercenaries, it seemed, had decided survival was more profitable than loyalty. As dawn broke over Geneva, Michael Bennett was led away in handcuffs for the second and final time. Emily watched from the helicopter as they flew toward the private clinic, where Sarah had been secretly transferred days earlier. Her mother was safe, her father would face justice, and beside her, Alexander Crawford flew them all toward a future none of them had imagined possible. The victory at Geneva proved devastatingly short-lived. Within hours of Bennett's arrest, a cascade of catastrophes struck that threatened to destroy everything they had fought to protect. It began with an urgent call from Alexander's legal team in New York. Sir, Bennett's lawyers have initiated a scorched earth strategy, his chief counsel reported grimly. They're claiming Sarah was complicit in the drug trials, that she profited from them. They fabricated documentation showing her signature on key approvals. The evidence was masterfully forged, drawing on years of medical records and Bennett's intimate knowledge of his ex-wife's work. Sarah, still recovering at the private clinic, watched in horror as international news networks ran the story. Her reputation, barely rebuilt, crumbled again. Stock footage showed her in her prime at New York Presbyterian, the captions now painting her as a willing participant in medical fraud. The Swiss authorities, under pressure from international pharmaceutical regulators, froze the clinic's assets pending investigation. Sarah's treatment, which had been showing such promise, was abruptly suspended. Her condition began to deteriorate without the specialized medications. Emily, who had shown such courage during the confrontation with her father, now faced a different kind of pain. Her schoolmates' parents, seeing the news reports, banned their children from associating with her. Social media, which had once championed her cause, turned viciously against her family. Even her beloved teddy bear, a symbol of comfort through years of hardship, was torn from her arms during a particularly aggressive paparazzi encounter. Alexander fought desperately on all fronts, but his resources were rapidly depleting. The Crawford Pharmaceuticals board, seizing the opportunity during the chaos, voted to remove him permanently. His personal accounts were frozen as part of the expanding investigation. The empire he had built over decades crumbled in days. "I don't understand," Emily whispered one evening, watching her mother struggle through another painful physical therapy session without proper medical support. "We proved Dad was lying. We had evidence. How can they still believe him?" Alexander, his silver hair now streaked with new grey, pulled her close. "Sometimes, brave girl, the truth isn't enough. Sometimes the powerful protect their own, even when they know they're wrong." He couldn't tell her about the threats he'd received, about the photos showing snipers tracking their movements around the clinic. Sarah's doctors advised moving her to a standard hospital, knowing it would mean inadequate care but seeing no alternative. As they prepared for the transfer, Sarah called Emily to her bedside. "Whatever happens," she whispered, her voice weak but determined, "remember who you are. Your father's lies can't change that." The true depth of their tragedy became clear when child services arrived at the clinic, armed with international custody orders. Bennett's legal team had convinced a judge that Sarah's deteriorating health and Alexander's unstable behavior made them both unfit guardians. "No," Emily screamed, clinging to Alexander as the social workers approached. You promised we'd stay together," her words echoed through the clinic's halls, a child's desperate plea against the machinery of bureaucratic cruelty. Sarah, too weak to stand, could only watch through tears as her daughter was led away. Alexander, the man who had moved heaven and earth to help them, stood powerless as everything they had fought for slipped away. As Emily disappeared down the corridor, her final cry haunted them both. "Mom, Mr. Crawford, please don't let them win again." Alexander Crawford's fall from grace became a cautionary tale in corporate America. The board of directors, emboldened by his vulnerability, moved swiftly to dismantle his legacy. Every decision he had made to help Sarah and Emily was scrutinized and reframed as evidence of mental instability. The penthouse apartment where he had once commanded his empire was seized as part of the corporate investigation. His private jet, the tool that had enabled Sarah's rescue, was impounded. Even his clothing and personal items were catalogued as potential evidence of financial misconduct. The media, which had once celebrated his transformation from ruthless CEO to compassionate protector, now painted him as a delusional figure destroyed by grief. Crawford's crusade when billionaires break became a trending topic. Photos of him sleeping in hospital chairs beside Sarah's bed were used to suggest a man who had lost touch with reality. Mr. Crawford, his former assistant Linda, warned during a clandestine meeting in a small coffee shop, "They're going through everything. Your personal files, your correspondence with Sarah, even your daughter Olivia's medical records." Her voice broke as she added, "They're trying to prove you've been unstable since her death." The final blow came when the medical board reviewed his decisions at the Crawford Medical Center. The emergency protocols he had authorized for Sarah's treatment were deemed reckless and unauthorized. The center, his last significant asset, was placed under external management. In the space of weeks, Alexander Crawford went from billionaire CEO to a man who couldn't even access his own bank accounts. He moved into a modest hotel room using cash saved from his last accessible funds. His expensive suits gave way to off-the-rack clothing, his gourmet meals to convenience store sandwiches. Yet these material losses paled against the emotional toll. Each day brought news of another setback in Sarah's case or another restriction on Emily's care. The girl who had become like a daughter to him was now locked away in a specialized facility where even phone contact was strictly monitored. His lawyers, once eager to handle his business, now hesitated to return his calls. Former friends crossed the street to avoid him. The same corporate warriors who had once sought his mentorship now used his downfall as a lesson in their business schools. One rainy evening, standing in his hotel room looking at a photo of Emily and Sarah, Alexander finally understood the true cost of redemption. He had traded everything he had built for a chance to save 2 lives, to right ancient wrongs. And now, when they needed him most, he found himself stripped of the very power that had made him effective. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent years accumulating wealth and influence, only to discover that his most meaningful actions would cost him everything. In trying to protect a family that wasn't his by blood, he had lost the empire that had defined his existence. Linda, still loyal despite everything, brought him daily reports about Sarah's declining health and Emily's isolation. Each update was a new wound, a reminder of promises he could no longer keep. The man who had once commanded billions couldn't even send Emily a new teddy bear to replace the one she had lost. Emily's experience in the state facility became its own unique form of torment. The stark institution, with its antiseptic halls and rigid schedules, felt like a prison designed to break her spirit. Her room, shared with 3 other at risk children, offered no privacy for her tears or space for her careful medical notes. The facility's staff, following strict protocols, confiscated her journal documenting Bennett's crimes. Her phone, her lifeline to Alexander and her mother, was taken away. Letters she wrote to Sarah were screened but never seemed to reach their destination. Even her artwork, filled with messages of love and resistance, disappeared from the facility's walls. Daily therapy sessions became exercises in frustration as psychiatrists tried to convince her that her memories of her father's crimes were trauma-induced delusions. They spoke in soft, condescending tones about reconciliation and accepting her father's love, while ignoring the evidence she had helped uncover. Her roommates, dealing with their own traumas, alternated between hostility and indifference. At meals, Emily sat alone, pushing food around her plate while calculating how many days of proper treatment her mother had missed. The facility's educational program, designed for children with behavioral issues, felt like a mockery of her previous academic achievements. The worst part was not knowing if her mother was getting proper care, not knowing if Alexander was still fighting for them, not knowing if anyone remembered the truth anymore. Each night, she whispered her mother's medical instructions to herself, terrified of forgetting the knowledge that had kept them alive for so long. Supervised visits with Michael Bennett were mandated by the court, despite Emily's protests. Her father would arrive in expensive suits, playing the role of the concerned parent for the facility staff. "Your mother's illness confused you," he would say, his voice honey-sweet with manufactured concern. "But Daddy's here to make everything right." The other children envied these visits from her successful father, not understanding why Emily returned from each one shaking with suppressed rage. The staff noted her resistance to paternal bonding in their reports, adding to the narrative of her psychological instability. During one particularly difficult night, Emily overheard staff discussing Sarah's condition. Her mother had been moved to a standard hospital, where her specialized treatment protocol was replaced with basic care. Without the advanced medications Alexander had provided, she was slowly slipping away. That night, Emily made her first escape attempt. She nearly made it to the perimeter fence before security caught her. The incident resulted in new restrictions, constant monitoring, limited outdoor time, and behavioral modification therapy that left her feeling hollow and defeated. As weeks turned into months, Emily watched her careful plans and brave resistance crumble under institutional pressure. The girl who had outsmarted powerful men and exposed corporate corruption now struggled to maintain her own sense of reality against the facility's sustained gaslighting. Her only act of defiance became a small ritual each night. She would stand at her window, looking in the direction she imagined the hospital to be, and whisper, "Hold on, Mum, Mr. Crawford promised. He never breaks his promises." But even as she spoke these words, doubt crept in. The world had taken everything from them before perhaps this time it would win. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Linda Chen, Alexander's former secretary, had been quietly gathering evidence for months, building a network of whistleblowers within Bennett Pharmaceuticals. One rainy evening, she walked into the FBI's New York office with a hard drive that would shatter Michael Bennett's carefully constructed defense. "This isn't just about drug trials anymore," she told federal investigators. "I have proof of judicial bribes, evidence tampering, and conspiracy across 3 continents." The hard drive contained years of hidden correspondence, offshore account details, and most damaging of all, video recordings of Bennett discussing plans to eliminate Sarah permanently. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails showed Bennett had paid off key witnesses to fabricate testimony against Sarah. Financial records revealed millions in payments to judges and regulatory officials. Most crucially, Linda had preserved security footage from the Geneva incident, showing Bennett's armed mercenaries attempting to breach Sarah's hospital room. Alexander, operating from his modest hotel room, received the news via a secure message: "It's done. They're moving on Bennett now." Within hours, federal agents raided Bennett Pharmaceuticals, carting away servers and documents. The corrupt board members who had protected Bennett found their own crimes exposed. The dominoes began to fall. Judges who had ruled against Sarah were suspended pending investigation. The medical board members who had revoked her license faced criminal charges. Even the social workers who had removed Emily were revealed to have received payments through Bennett's network of shell companies. But the most damning revelation came from Bennett's private files. Hidden camera footage showed him tampering with Sarah's medication years ago, deliberately triggering the autoimmune condition that had nearly killed her. He had systematically poisoned his ex-wife, then used her illness to paint her as unstable and incompetent. News networks that had vilified Sarah now scrambled to report the truth. Headlines shifted dramatically. Bennett's house of cards, a decade of medical terrorism, exposed international authorities, froze his remaining assets, dismantling the criminal empire he had built on human suffering. The FBI's lead investigator personally visited Alexander's hotel room. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "we owe you an apology. Your actions, which we mistook for instability, were actually crucial to exposing this conspiracy. Without your protection of Sarah and Emily Mitchell, Bennett might never have been stopped." Alexander barely registered the vindication. "How quickly can you get Emily released?" he demanded, already reaching for his coat. The investigator smiled, holding up an emergency court order. "We're heading there now. Would you like to do the honors?" For Emily, deliverance came in the middle of another mandatory therapy session. The facility director entered, looking flustered, followed by Alexander Crawford and federal agents. The sight of Alexander, though thinner and grayer, sparked something in Emily she had feared lost forever hope. "Pack your things. Brave girl," he said, voice thick with emotion. "We're going to see your mother." Before they left, Emily faced the therapy group one last time. "I wasn't delusional," she announced clearly. "I wasn't traumatized or confused. I was right. And now everyone knows it." The other children watched in amazement as Emily Mitchell, the girl they had dismissed as troubled, walked out with her head held high. Sarah's vindication unfolded on multiple fronts. The medical board, faced with irrefutable evidence of corruption, not only reinstated her license but issued a formal apology. International medical journals published retractions of articles that had questioned her integrity, replacing them with investigations into Bennett's criminal enterprise. The hospital where she had once served as head of pediatric oncology invited her to return with full honors. Her former colleagues, many of whom had turned their backs during her darkest hours, now scrambled to express their support. Letters of apology flooded in from institutions that had blacklisted her. While Sarah remained too ill for immediate professional work, the restoration of her reputation brought something more valuable: access to proper medical care. The Crawford Medical Center in Geneva, now returned to Alexander's control, reopened its doors to her. The specialized treatment protocol she had been denied could finally resume. The revelation of Bennett's systematic poisoning explained the mysterious progression of her illness. Testing revealed traces of carefully administered toxins designed to mimic autoimmune symptoms. With this knowledge, doctors could finally implement an effective treatment plan. Sarah's recovery, though slow, showed promising signs. Emily's daily visits to the hospital became celebrations of small victories. Each improvement in her mother's condition, each new sign of returning strength, felt like a personal triumph. The girl who had spent years fighting to keep her mother alive now got to witness her healing. Alexander's own redemption in the corporate world came swiftly. The Crawford Pharmaceuticals board, facing criminal investigations themselves, resigned en masse. Shareholders, recognizing that his unstable actions had actually saved the company from complicity in Bennett's crimes, demanded his reinstatement as CEO. But Alexander's priorities had shifted. Rather than return to his former role, he proposed restructuring Crawford Pharmaceuticals into a non-profit medical research foundation. The board, eager to salvage the company's reputation, agreed. The same corporate machine that had once prioritized profits would now serve the values Sarah had always fought for. Linda Chen was appointed as the foundation's chief operating officer, her loyalty and integrity finally receiving proper recognition. Under her guidance, the organization began investigating neglected diseases and developing affordable treatments for rare conditions. The Crawford Medical Center expanded its programs to include a special wing for patients like Sarah, victims of medical fraud and corporate negligence. Emily, drawing on her experiences, helped design a support program for children of patients, ensuring no child would face such challenges alone again. As Sarah grew stronger, she began consulting on cases similar to hers, using her medical expertise to help identify other potential victims of pharmaceutical abuse. Her story became a rallying point for medical ethics reform, inspiring new legislation to protect whistleblowers and patients. Michael Bennett's final downfall played out in a Manhattan federal courthouse. The man who had once commanded a pharmaceutical empire now sat diminished, his designer suits replaced by prison orange, his confident smirk erased by the weight of evidence against him. Emily's testimony proved devastating. Speaking with calm clarity, she detailed years of watching her mother's deliberate poisoning, of struggling to keep her alive while Bennett blocked access to treatment. Medical experts confirmed her detailed documentation of symptoms and reactions had been instrumental in understanding the method of poisoning. "I learned about medicine to save my mom," Emily told the hushed courtroom. But Dad knew more about poison, her words, delivered with the simple directness of a child, cut through the legal jargon and corporate doublespeak that had protected Bennett for so long. Sarah, still using a wheelchair but growing stronger each day, faced her ex-husband across the courtroom. "You didn't just try to kill me," she stated, her voice steady. "You tried to kill everything I believed in: integrity, compassion, the duty to protect our patients. But you failed. Those values survived, and they brought us justice." Alexander's testimony revealed the intricate web of corruption Bennett had woven through the pharmaceutical industry. His detailed records of corporate malfeasance, combined with Linda Chen's evidence, exposed dozens of co-conspirators. The investigation expanded to include hospital administrators, research facilities, and regulatory officials. The jury took only 3 hours to reach their verdict. Bennett was found guilty on all counts: attempted murder, medical fraud, corruption, and conspiracy. The judge, noting the calculated cruelty of poisoning his own wife and traumatizing his child, imposed the maximum sentence: multiple life terms without possibility of parole. As Bennett was led away, he tried one last time to catch Emily's eye, to manipulate her emotions. But she turned away, holding tight to Alexander's hand on one side and her mother's on the other. The man who had dominated their lives through fear had become irrelevant. The courthouse steps became a scene of redemption. Sarah, supported by Alexander, stood before the media not as a victim, but as a champion of medical ethics. Emily, no longer the desperate little thief, spoke eloquently about the importance of believing children when they report abuse. International headlines captured the moment justice prevails, Bennett empire falls as truth triumphs, financial markets responded as hundreds of fraudulent medical patents were invalidated, creating opportunities for affordable treatments to reach patients worldwide. The victory extended beyond their personal vindication. Sarah's case became a landmark in medical ethics law, establishing new protections for whistleblowers and stricter oversight of pharmaceutical trials. Emily's detailed records became a template for documenting medical abuse, taught in law enforcement training programs. 1 year after Bennett's conviction, the Crawford Medical Center hosted a unique celebration. The hospital's largest conference hall had been transformed, filled with flowers and laughter. Sarah Mitchell, now fully recovered, stood at the podium to inaugurate the new Emily Mitchell Children's Wing, a specialized facility dedicated to treating young patients from families without resources. A year ago, I was fighting for my life in this very building, Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. Today, we're fighting for others. My daughter taught me that even the smallest hands can change the world. This wing is her vision brought to life. She gestured to Emily, who sat between Alexander and Linda in the front row. Emily, now 10, had grown into her role as the hospital's youngest patient advocate. Her experiences had been transformed into a program helping children understand and cope with their parents' illnesses. The diary she had kept during her mother's illness became a template for family medical documentation. Alexander watched from his seat, his silver hair catching the morning light. The past year had reshaped him as profoundly as any business deal ever had. Crawford Pharmaceuticals, under its new non-profit structure, had become a leader in developing affordable treatments for rare diseases. The fortune he had once hoarded now funded research grants and patient care programs. None of this would have been possible, Sarah continued, without one man who chose compassion over power, truth over profit. Alexander Crawford didn't just save my life, he showed us all that redemption is possible, that it's never too late to choose what's right. She turned to him, tears shining in her eyes. You became the father Emily deserved and the partner I never dared hope for. The audience applauded as Alexander joined Sarah at the podium, taking her hand. The gesture, simple but profound, symbolized how far they had come from that first desperate encounter between a wealthy businessman and a small thief. Sarah and Emily taught me what real wealth looks like, Alexander addressed the crowd. It's not in bank accounts or corporate holdings. It's in the courage to stand up for truth, the strength to keep fighting when all seems lost, and the love that makes us family even without blood ties. Emily stepped up to join them, carrying a small plaque. Together, they unveiled the Wing's dedication for every child who needs an advocate, every parent fighting impossible odds, and every person brave enough to stand with them. Your courage lights our way. The first patients would arrive tomorrow, children whose families, like Emily and Sarah once had, faced seemingly hopeless battles against both illness and system. But now they would find not just medical care, but a community built on understanding and support. As the ceremony concluded, Emily hugged both her mother and Alexander. We did it, she whispered. We really did it. The little girl who had once stolen a wallet to buy medicine now had helped create a place where no child would need to make such choices. The transformation of the Crawford estate became a symbol of their new life together. The mansion that had once showcased Alexander's wealth now bustled with purpose. The formal gardens where Emily had first planted her daisies expanded into a therapeutic landscape where patients could find peace and healing. Sarah's medical practice reopened in a renovated wing of the estate, specializing in cases other doctors had deemed hopeless. Her reputation for combining cutting-edge treatment with deep compassion drew patients from around the world. But she never forgot her roots, maintaining a policy that no one would be turned away for lack of funds. Alexander's study, once a fortress of corporate power, became a shared family space. Emily's medical textbooks mingled with Sarah's research papers on his shelves, while his financial expertise now focused on making treatments accessible to those in need. The walls, once bare except for profit charts, now displayed Emily's artwork and family photographs. The most significant change came in the quiet moments. Sunday mornings found them having breakfast in the garden, planning new initiatives for the foundation. Emily would share stories from her patient support groups, her natural talent for healing now guided by proper training. Sarah and Alexander would exchange glances over their coffee, still amazed at how life had brought them together. Their home became a gathering place for others fighting similar battles. Support groups met in the converted ballroom, while the kitchen regularly produced meals for patients' families. The same staff who had once served corporate dinners now coordinated volunteer programs and patient services. The media noticed this transformation too. Magazines that had once featured Alexander's business conquests now covered the family's philanthropic work. The Crawford Mitchell model became shorthand for ethical medical care, inspiring similar programs worldwide. Emily particularly thrived in their new life. The girl who had once hidden in shadows to steal medicine now confidently led hospital board meetings in developing youth programs. Her unique perspective, part patient advocate, part medical prodigy, and all heart, brought a fresh approach to healthcare administration. Their success inspired others. Former business rivals of Alexander's, seeing the fulfillment he'd found, began their own charitable initiatives. Sarah's approach to patient care became part of medical school curricula. Emily's peer support program was adopted by hospitals across the country. Yet they remained grounded in their purpose. Each new patient who came through their doors reminded them of their own journey. Every scared child found in Emily a friend who truly understood. Every desperate parent found in Sarah and Alexander advocates who would fight alongside them. The final pieces of their story fell into place on a crisp autumn evening, 1 year to the day since Emily had first tried to steal Alexander's wallet. The family gathered in the garden, where Sarah and Alexander had prepared a special surprise for Emily. "There's something we want to ask you," Sarah began, taking her daughter's hand. "Alexander and I have been talking." She glanced at him, receiving an encouraging nod. "We want to make our family official. Alexander would like to adopt you if you're willing." Emily stood silent for a moment, emotions playing across her face. The girl who had survived so much, who had fought so hard, finally allowed herself to cry tears of joy. "Really?" she whispered. "You want to be my dad? For real?" Alexander knelt before her, his own eyes glistening. "I've loved you as a daughter since the day you showed me what real courage looks like. I'd be honored if you'd let me make it official." He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a locket matching the one Sarah wore, a symbol of their united family. The adoption ceremony was held in the hospital's garden, where their journey had come full circle. Doctors, patients, and staff gathered to witness the official union of a family that love had already forged. Emily wore a new dress, but insisted on keeping her worn sneakers a reminder of where she'd come from. During the celebration that followed, Sarah addressed their gathered friends and supporters. "Our story began with desperation and fear," she said, "but it taught us that hope can grow in the darkest places. Sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected ways." The Crawford Mitchell Foundation continued to expand its reach, but its heart remained in the individual stories of lives changed. Each success, each family helped, added another chapter to their legacy. Emily's original medical notebook, the one she'd kept during Sarah's illness, was published as a guide for young caregivers, its proceeds funding scholarships for children affected by medical crises. As night fell on their celebration, the three of them stood together in their garden. Emily, secure between her parents, looked up at the stars. "Do you think your daughter Olivia would be happy about this?" she asked Alexander softly. "About us becoming a family." Alexander drew both Emily and Sarah closer. "Olivia taught me how precious life is," he replied. "You and your mother taught me how to live it fully again. Love doesn't divide when we share it, it multiplies." Their story became more than just a tale of redemption. It became a beacon of hope, proving that even in a world driven by profit and power, compassion could triumph. The little girl who stole a wallet, the mother who never lost her integrity, and the businessman who rediscovered his humanity, together they had written a new prescription for healing, one that treated not just the body, but the heart and soul as well. If this story of love, redemption, and triumph touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how it resonated with you. Support our storytelling team by subscribing to our channel. Your engagement helps us create more meaningful content that celebrates the human spirit. Share this video with friends and family who might find hope in this tale. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of compassion to change lives. Together we can spread more stories that remind us of what truly matters.